Can't just close the business and lose everything.
Before you know it, you have a business that's been profitable for years and years and years on the brink of collapse.
Business, you're on your own. You've got to make the decisions. You've got to decide.
Hello and welcome to the Director First podcast with me, Chris Worden. Today we are going to be having a chat with a client of ours recently had to place a long-standing business through an insolvency process. And the reason why we do this is for you that are watching and listening so you can understand what happened, what liquidation was like, not what we say it's going to be like, what a director tells you the real life experience of it was, and sort of how they feel now. So, Adam, welcome to the podcast. Could you please briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business before it started to hit difficulties?
Yep, thanks, Chris. Well, I'm Adam, and we've had a long-standing kitchen business running for many years, and it was always very successful. We got through Brexit, we got through COVID, we got through cost of living crisis, we got through all the different things. But lately, over the last sort of 18 months, I've known the business wasn't doing as well as it could be doing. And I knew in the back of my mind there was something that I had to do before it got to the point where it was completely irretrievable. And you were recommended to us as helping somebody that I know, and he couldn't speak highly enough of you.
Oh, good. No, he's well, obviously recommendations are always the best form of any type of advertising. So when we got the call, we understood the situation, and it was always about time in this job. Now, how did you start to feel when you sort of realised, oof, we may not get through this? Because there was a number of different factors that were coming together to cause this, wasn't there?
Realistically, I was kind of, as a managing director of the business, you're on your own. You've got to make the decisions, you've got to decide what to do. And there's no one that can really understand the business like you do, or talk to and get a valued approach on what you should probably do next. I felt really alone, to be honest, and not having anyone that I could approach. So making that decision and actually approaching you was really useful, because it opened my eyes to actually this isn't the only option. I can't just close the business and lose everything. There are other options out there for me.
Yeah, but people think, when a business becomes insolvent, that's it. It's my livelihood that's going, up in flames, and I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to lose the way the way I provide for my family, and that is, and of course, listen, insolvency can be really serious, and those things can and have happened to people, but in 99% of cases, that's not the case. It's the key thing is to get early advice. And I remember your advice was early. At first, it was a case of, I have this worry over the horizon. And the advice were, well, I think right now you've got a good enough reason to sit tight and see what happens. But let's check in again next month. And we did that. And it become apparent that things were getting worse, to a point where actually we need to seriously look at our options here. What were your biggest fears during those, initial signs that there's something amiss here?
Really, the biggest fear for me is this is my life, really. It's what I've put everything into for the last sort of 15 years. And to lose it because of something that's almost totally out of our control, the economy and what's going on in the world, was really heartbreaking. My biggest fear about this process was having no knowledge about it whatsoever, and actually how to do it, and how to do it legally and correctly, and to make it actually work for me rather than work for everyone else.
Yeah, the key thing here when it comes to insolvency, again, I talk about strategy and timing, and when you go through some type of process, you've got to be fair to everybody, creditors, stakeholders, um, but from a director's point of view, and that's what we do at Director First, we're there for the director in an advisory capacity. Obviously, we only work with licensed insolvency practitioners who we have relationships with for years and years and years. But we get the inquiry, and it's like, okay, what's the outcome the director's looking for? What are the worries? What are the concerns? And then we start to discuss those with the insolvency practitioner and we agree on a way forward. But the key to early advice is, if you're a director, you want to get the best outcome possible as well for yourself without breaking any rules.
Yeah,
And I see a lot of these things go wrong where a director, they can see something happening in the distance and then they start to move assets out of the company at a fraction of the price. They start taking deposits that are never going to get done, never get fulfilled. They start to just squander all the money in the bank account. And the good thing with yourself is you took guidance and it was a case of, right, potentially we may need to look at some type of pre-pack process because fundamentally there was a business to save here. It was those external issues, you know, the economy. I mean, this is going to go out at sometime late 2024. It's been brutal. People have had less money to spend on products that you're offering. Factor that with costs are going up, and I think there was quite an onerous lease in there as well on a big
definitely. Hmm.
premises. And before you know it, you have a business that's been profitable for years and years and years on the brink of collapse. A pre-pack, it preserved some form of the business. It was able to be hived out. You was able to purchase that for a fair market value deemed by an agent, and it saved jobs. It saved orders. You are still able to provide that service in your area, albeit in the guise of a new limited company. And as long as you follow that process step by step, you're totally within the law. Can you sort of describe to us what the actual process was like for you? Because again, the idea of somebody going through a liquidation sends dread up and down the spines of directors all over the UK. What was it like?
Yeah, well, the process for me was really a recommendation from a good friend who had actually done this and used you before. And that initially was fantastic because there's nothing better than a recommendation. And then we had a chat, and basically you gave me what you told me about what you do and how you can help. And that helped again to alleviate a lot of my concerns and fears about what potential there is to actually rectify or to damage limitation on the situation that I was in. And then obviously because of the timing, we had regular updates and regular chats about how the business was going and whether things were getting better, what was happening in the world. And this kind of, over the course of probably about 5 or 6 months, I think it was, led us to the point where actually things aren't going to get better. But by then, we'd had quite a long conversation about the ways that we could do things or lay things out to actually move forward in a positive light for everyone. And that for me was great because, as I said earlier, there is, as a director, quite often there is no one else you can talk to in the business that understands the business, what you're going through, and what you face realistically. So you do feel on your own a lot. And I feel the service you provided not only supported me immensely, but really guided me in a direction I would have never have gone down on my own. I would never have even thought to look at this kind of thing before.
I see it so many times where a director is so scared to pick the phone up because it's almost, oh crikey, if I call this guy, I'm pulling the shutters down. And that really isn't the case.
No, it
And I
becomes very
say this,
real at that point.
yeah, but I mean, we speak to hundreds of directors every single month here. We don't do hundreds of insolvencies, which is good news for the people watching this. A
Hmm.
lot of the advice is it's just a bit of guidance on what their options are there and then, maybe some insight in how to speak to creditors, how to manage some cash flow a little bit better, how to, you know, extend better payment terms with HMRC. And then they'll go off and they'll implement what we've said, and things get better. Um, Other directors will wait till the very, very last minute. I have it right now. You know, at the moment this week, we've had two companies that have called who have had a winding up petition delivered. And the problem when it gets to that stage, the only reason a business has been served a winding up petition is they've not communicated with that creditor. They've
Hmm.
literally buried their head in the sand, and it's forced the creditor to act. Petitions are going to be advertised in the next few weeks. It causes a whole raft of additional issues and costs and makes the problem a lot more difficult to solve. The key thing with early advice, like yourself, is what my job is on day one is to go, right, where are we? Where is this business right now? Not, you know, on a good day, not on a bad day, where does it sit? What does it owe? Does it have any assets? What's trade like? Um, and you know, what's the intention of the director? And when we understand all those bits of the puzzle, we can start to outline some options. You know, one option is to actually just wind a business down and go, you know what, I've had enough. I
Yeah,
cannot make this work anymore. It's the end of the line, and the liquidation draws a line in the sand. The director appoints a liquidator. There is an orderly wind down. If there's assets, they are sold off to raise some money for creditors. And it is the end of the line. What a lot of directors will look for though is there a possibility that I can do this again, learn the lessons from the insolvency? And actually, a lot of insolvencies we've had to deal with over the last few years, the only lesson really that most people are taking into their new venture is I need more cash. I need a bigger buffer. But there's so many jobs that I've been part of where with the pandemic, the cost of living, the drop in sales, like it was impossible to get out of. Like there was no, there could have been no planning that would have circumnavigated these issues. I mean, yes, they could have had a bigger cash buffer, but you know what? For a lot of people, Alan, it would have just kicked the can down the line. Apologies, Adam. It would have
that's
just
right.
kicked the can down the line. So you know, when you actually went through the process of liquidation, you know,
Yeah.
could you talk to our viewers of how that was, the good, the bad, like what was that process like? Where we got to a point where okay, we need to do this now. What happened then?
Well, to be honest, the liquidation side for me seemed actually pretty simple because of the chats we'd had before and the process and everything. I'd got all the information ready. I'd planned it all. We'd had independent valuations on stock done, all those sorts of different things. So when it came to the point of going into liquidation, we were well prepared for it and knew everything that we had to provide to the liquidators to start that process. Obviously, there was some other further information that they wanted, which was relatively simple and straightforward. And really, since then, I haven't had really many phone calls, many letters, anything asking for more information. The liquidators have really kind of just taken on everything now and are pushing forward and actually sorting out all the different issues that we had over the period of time with the creditors. And fingers crossed, it will all just get sorted and everyone can move on, and actually the new business can benefit and grow, and the world will become a more even place.
And I think that that's really, it's important. You were really organised, and if you're watching this and you've either appointed a liquidator or you are about to appoint a liquidator, they're going to need a lot of information from you. And as long as you can give them that information in a timely manner, there's more chance of things running smoothly. If they raise any queries, it's dead important. A director's got to comply. Once you're in a liquidation process and a query is raised, you must comply with that liquidator. Worst thing that can happen is it bury your head in the sand once you've actually appointed the liquidator, or God forbid you decide to appoint a liquidator, they send you a raft of information that's required, and the director retreats and goes, "Oh, I can't deal with this," because some directors find it quite overwhelming on when we get into that process of, right, actually we need to start serving notice on creditors, and you're given a big list of information that's required, and people freeze. You've just got to bite off a bit every day, and get it done, get it over to the liquidator. And again, this business is now in liquidation. It will take 12 months to close it into until it's dissolved, at least on Companies House. But you've given yourself the best chance going forward, because where it was, that this business was going to end up in, it wasn't going to survive. I want to talk a little bit more about the process that you went through, which is, what we term a pre-pack. That there was some parts of this insolvent business, Adam, that had some value. There was a little bit of stock, things like databases, phone numbers, etc., etc. And when a business is insolvent, if you, in your heart of heart, believe that you can make it successful again without the legacy debt burden and take the lessons, then a pre-pack might be for your, might be a viable option. But it's very important when a business has become insolvent and assets are going to be sold, that you bring in an independent agent to value those assets. Now, if you're working with an insolvency professional, I am sure they will be able to introduce you to an agent who can do that. And why that's so important is, when you're moving and selling assets, when a business has become insolvent, you don't want to open yourself up to be criticised down the line. And the way to avoid that is to have an independent valuation done. And as long as your offer to purchase those assets is in line with the valuation that's been carried out by an independent agent, you can't be criticised down the line going forward. And that's a route that lots and lots of directors are taking right now. Adam, how did you sort of find director first? How did we assist you? What were the best parts of our service, and why did you decide to choose us? I know it was a recommendation, but we're not naive. We know there's lots of firms out there that are trying to get this type of business. What set us apart?
Yeah, well, obviously you were recommended, first of all, from another business owner that I was just chatting to about. He asked how business was going. I told him in real terms, and then that's when we started talking about you, and that's how I got your details and contacted you afterwards. You weren't the only insolvency people I spoke to. I did speak to one other company as well, And to be honest, I had a video meeting with them, and it was like talking to accountants who literally were just looking at numbers and not listening to the actual business or knowing what the business was about or even really caring about what the business was about. It was literally just numbers, numbers, numbers. Whereas the difference with you is you actually listened to me and the business, tried to understand a little bit about the business, and actually gave some really genuine advice about other things we could look at and things that we could do or change to actually perhaps make things better. It was a more personal touch, and you're a very nice guy as well. So why wouldn't we?
I appreciate that. With regards to getting other advice, I almost, well, I don't almost, I promote it. Yeah, I say to people, don't jump into bed with the first person you speak to, including me. Like, I think it's such a big decision putting a business through an insolvency process. You've got to make the right choice.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, some people aren't a good fit for us. You know, I'm not
Mhm.
everyone's cup of tea, and some directors, in the end, I just say, honestly, you're better off going with someone else because they're going to drive you mad and they've got problems all over them, you know. Um, but if someone makes a mistake on this, it's so costly. Like there's not one day that doesn't pass where we will have to speak to a director who maybe not. I'll be careful how I phrase this. They just wasn't well informed before they made the decision. That's a lot of firms out there. They don't want to do any work before you've paid them. That's the top and bottom of it. They don't want to do any work until they've become appointed as liquidated. Now the problem with that is if the firm you're talking to does not want to put any effort until you've appointed them, the director hasn't got a bloody clue what's coming down the line. The basics that must be checked on every single job is overdrawn directors' loan accounts. If you have them, how are they going to be handled? How much is it going to cost you to settle it? Intercompany loans. I had a big one today, actually. These have been wound, they're on the verge of being wound up. There is a large loan that is owed from a group undertaking. Now, basically, this company's insolvent, needs to be put through a process, but this company is owed a substantial amount of money from their main business. And in an insolvency, whether it's the official receiver or the liquidator that they appoint voluntarily, they're going to have to try and get that money back. Now, potentially, this is going to, the whole group of companies is going to collapse on the basis there's a big intercompany loan. And they've taken advice elsewhere. No one's mentioned it. And the skeptic in me says the reason no one's mentioned it is because there's going to be a lot more fees billed if it gets uncovered post appointment. And actually, what the real advice is to do is to go, right, let's have a few hours on this. Let's work a plan out for that director. No one can sweep it under the table. I'm not saying there's insolvency practitioners out there that will look the other way. That is not what I'm saying. But there are insolvency firms out there, us being one of them, that will take the time to help you understand your position in full. Look at all the pitfalls that might happen if you put a company through an insolvency process, and figure out ways of mitigating those issues before they happen. So when you're ready to sign and put pen to paper, you know what it's going to cost and how it's going to cost you. So I mean, listen, we're always grateful for people choosing us. What did you find most helpful or reassuring about how we do things here?
I would say the monthly chats we were having beforehand really eased my mind about the direction we were going in, what we were doing, and that it was the correct thing to do given the situation that we were in. Because I had no experience of this before. Hopefully, I'll never have experience of it again. But I had to do something at that point, and the way you handled it and the advice you gave is really invaluable for me, and has hopefully really worked out really well in the long term for me and the staff and going forward.
Now, looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently?
There's, in all honesty, I don't think there's a lot I could have done differently with regard to the business, because the way our business got into this position was because of the ongoing issues with Brexit and COVID and cost of living and the Ukraine war and everything else, which was really just totally out of our control. Perhaps we would have changed a few things we did in the business a year or 18 months ago to not sign a lease on a big premises, or to try and develop. But in business, you've got to try and push forward to actually grow. Otherwise, you're not growing, you're just standing still. So in reality, I don't think there's much I could have changed that we were in the position that we were in. With regard to the changes that we could have made once we were in that position, I'm really pleased with the direction we actually took and the advice that you actually gave us, because I think any other company that we might have approached might have looked at it differently, might have been more mathematical about it, and really not cared so much about us and the individuals that are actually involved, which I can only thank you for, really.
You'll find a lot of insolvency people will want to act straight away, like literally, okay, I'll be down tomorrow. Let's sign notices, and that should be a red flag to anybody. That there are of course situations where that is absolutely the right course of action, but they're quite few and far between. That the key is timing, and taking a breath and understanding all options. What advice would you give to other business owners who may be facing a similar situation right now, Adam?
I would say realistically, if you're as a business director, if you're in a position where you know the business isn't going in the direction you want, and potentially there are problems further down the road, have a chat, give them a call, see what advice they might give you. It might be that just to change a few things, as you said earlier, but the advice you give is really reassuring, and it's another point of view which they wouldn't have probably heard before. So I'd say just give you a call, really, and just ask and put your position forward, and see what other options there are.
Thank you, Adam. Is there anything else that you would like to share about your experience or about working with Director First?
I found the whole experience with Director First really good. All the monthly calls and the general advice, the things that we looked at, the information you asked us to get and to prepare for everything. So when it came to the actual insolvency, I was very prepared and knew what I was going to be asked and all the information to hand over. And then when we were passed over to the liquidators, they did exactly as you said they would, and asked basically for the information that I already had. And the process was very smooth, almost from the very first meeting that we had to 6 or 8 months later, when it actually went into liquidation. So I'm very pleased with the whole process from start to finish about what has actually happened.
Brilliant. And how do you feel now that the liquidation process is behind you?
I'm relieved, and I know in my heart of hearts, if I hadn't have gone down this route, I would be in a totally different position now. And I don't have much hair anyway, but I would be pulling out whatever hair I had left, and really completely worried anxious and not really having a clue about the best way forward. And I think this has really given me other options that I would never have looked at in the past, and actually sorts itself out, and the economy starts to pick up and the world moves forward. Hopefully we'll be in a bigger, stronger position than we ever were, and everything will be more positive.
Adam, thank you for joining us. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for putting your faith in us. We wish you all the best. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today, and I will
Thank
wrap
you,
that up.
Chris. Thank you, Chris. I
Many
really
thanks.
appreciate all your help. Thank you.
No problem.